Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marc Hakim, and today I'll be discussing the topic Aboriginal peoples of the Sydney Basin and surrounding areas. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, before getting into much detail, I've decided to break down the structure of this video so everyone could have a basic understanding of how this video will flow. So the first part of the video is the history/context, and this will briefly run us through the important parts in history that affected the Aboriginal communities and their people. This part will be an important layer of information as we will build on it as the video advances. Then we move on to identify the main clans that occupied the Sydney regions, and here we will discuss the geographics in detail. Moving on, I will discuss how the Aboriginal people lived their lives and carried out daily tasks within their community, which ultimately allowed them to survive for thousands upon thousands of years. And finally, in the conclusion, we will quickly summarize everything we discussed together and hopefully cement the main ideas and notions that we've discussed. I would like to start off by informing everyone about the rich Aboriginal history. The first fleet arrived at Botany Bay on the 24th of January 1788, led by Captain Philip Arthur. At that time, there were three main indigenous groups that occupied the Sydney Basin. These were the Dahawus, the Ku-ring-gai, and the Duharaks. The Aboriginal population at that time in the Sydney region was estimated to be around 5,000 to 8,000 people. Shortly after the arrival of the European settlers, an outbreak of violence occurred between the Aboriginal people and the British. These were provoked due to the British failing to respect the land, something that the Aboriginal people valued so highly, as the British settlers rapidly destroyed much of the trees that provided much needed food and shelter for the Aboriginal people, just in order for them to build their own houses. The British also polluted many rivers and creeks that the Aboriginal people used for thousands of years, which further pushed some of these Aboriginal people further inland, searching for safe water supplies. The devastation did not stop there. With the introduction of many new animals and species, an epidemic of smallpox occurred in the Aboriginal communities, which wiped out most of the Aboriginal people that lived on the coast, and soon after, it spread to the inland people. The impact was so devastating that it was estimated that 2/3 of the Aboriginal population living in the Sydney Basin were wiped out. The ramification of the epidemic was not only death, but much of the very valuable Aboriginal history was lost, as many elders passed away without transmitting some of these essential stories down to their children. Also, many trees and rock carvings were lost, as the British settlers used these materials to build houses and farms. On the brighter side, as the years went on, the Aboriginal people experienced less discrimination as they were eventually rewarded with their equality and voting rights, as that was evident in the 1967 referendum. That was a huge milestone in the Aboriginal and Australian history. Now, before jumping into explanation about how the Aboriginal people lived their lives, I'll first identify the three main Aboriginal clans that occupied the Sydney Basin areas and its respective surroundings. The first clan or band that occupied the Sydney regions were the Duharak. The Duharak had a territory that extended from the Blue Mountains to the coast of Botany Bay, but they were predominantly present in the area of Western Sydney. The Duharaks were also the largest of the three clans, as it was estimated in 1788 that they had a population of 2,000 people. The second clan were the Dahawu people. The Dahawus were mostly confined to the area south of Botany Bay, extending as far south as Nawara area, across the Georges River in Sydney's west. History indicates that they burned the environment more often than any other Aboriginal tribe. That is because the nature of the flora in the area, which was heath and scrub, required this to be done in order to keep the area inhabitable for future use. The third and final clan were the Ku-ring-gai. The Ku-ring-gai people lived between Port Jackson and Broken Bay. History and colonial books indicate that the Ku-ring-gai clan relied heavily on crustaceans and sea life, more often than any other clan, as it was abundant to them throughout the whole year. It is also worth noting that each clan was subsequently divided into many mini clans or tribes, made up of groups of 50, and they were usually groups of family members. Now having identified the main clans that occupied the Sydney Basin, now we will explore together how the indigenous people lived with one another and how they carried out day-to-day tasks. All the Aboriginal communities were extremely skilled at hunting, fishing, and they were ultimately excellent at survival in general, as it was embedded within them for thousands of years. In the Aboriginal communities, it was the male's role to hunt and acquire food for the family, while it was the female's responsibility to nurture the young children and also gather food items that were close to their campus, as these included berries, witchery grubs, and honey ants. Both males and females took on the responsibility in terms of teaching the young ones important lessons. That was done through telling stories or by taking them on hunting trips and allowing them to observe and learn. In the Sydney regions, all the tribes lived predominantly on the coastal parts. Hence, they had accessibility to the rivers and oceans, which the inland people did not. That ultimately meant that throughout the whole year, the Aboriginal people would predominantly rely on the sea life and crustaceans for food. However, some clans like the Dahawas would only eat sea life and crustaceans during the summer, and then in winter they would rely on gathering berries and witchery grubs and hunting for possums, kangaroos, and wombats. The Dahawas did so because they did not want to exhaust a single source for food, as they believed by switching between both sources of food they would allow it to grow back in time for future harvest and use. And I personally think it was a very smart method. The Sydney regions inhabited many unique plants that could not be found anywhere else across Australia. That did not go unnoticed for the Aboriginal communities living there, as they used many of them to make medicines, as for example, the tea tree oil plant native to Sydney was used as an antiseptic, as it was crushed and applied as a paste for wounds, and it was also brewed in teas for throat ailments. Furthermore, other plants like the Wunga Wunga vine were also used to create tools, such as baskets and fishing traps, which aided the Aboriginal people in gathering food easily. It is also known that the Aboriginal communities had a deep relationship with the land, as they respected the land highly and tried to protect it at all costs. In the Aboriginal communities, many important lessons and teachings about the land and survival in general were communicated through storytelling. Stories were communicated by the elders through dances, drumming, and unique sounds, which helped the younger kids understand the story better and, most importantly, learn the intended lesson, as these stories were performed during the afternoon or just before bedtime, as it was believed that the kids would go to sleep dreaming about these stories. In conclusion, I would like to quickly summarize everything that we talked about in today's video. I will do so in dot points. The Aboriginal people that lived in the Sydney area mainly lived on the coastal parts, hence their diet was predominantly made up of seafood and crustaceans. The Aboriginal people were extremely skilled hunters and fishermen that adapted extremely well to their environment by utilizing all the resources that were available to them. The Aboriginal people valued and respected the land highly and protected it against all costs. The Aboriginal people were family oriented and they shared the responsibilities with one another. Overall, I would like to thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something new and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.